You're safe here now.
Thank you.
Always.
The stagecoach rattled into the dusty mountain settlement, just as the first snowflakes of an early winter began to drift through the icy, pine-scented air. Della Mayfield clutched her carpetbag to her chest like a shield, her knuckles white against the worn leather as she searched the small crowd for the man who had sent for her by mail. She had been raised in a strict church orphanage where the girls slept in narrow, cold dormitory beds separated by thin curtains, never once sharing a bed with another living soul. Silas Creed stepped forward from the shadows of the livery stable, a towering man with shoulders like the nearby granite cliffs and eyes the color of a deep, patient river. He tipped his wide-brimmed hat and introduced himself in a low rumble that made something flutter deep in Della's belly, though she was far too frightened to name it. The ride up to his isolated mountain ranch was a blur of white-bellied pines and the rhythmic creak of wagon wheels, and she did not speak a single word until they arrived at the sturdy log cabin. Inside, a roaring fire pushed back the chill, and a simple pine bed covered with a wedding ring quilt dominated the single room, sending a fresh wave of panic through her trembling frame. Silas noticed her distress and immediately offered to sleep in the barn, his voice so gentle that Della nearly wept from the unexpected kindness of a man she barely knew. That first night she lay rigid and alone in his bed, listening to the wind howl, convinced that no decent man would stay patient for long once he realized how utterly useless and naive she truly was. The following morning she burned the biscuits and dropped the coffee pot, but Silas just chuckled, ruffled his dark hair, and told her that failure was the best teacher on the mountain. Each evening she would sit stiffly on the edge of the bed while he banked the fire, and he would bid her a respectful goodnight before retreating to the cold barn without a single complaint or reproach. One afternoon while he was mending a broken fence, a blizzard descended like a white wolf, trapping him inside the cabin with her just as the temperature plummeted to a deadly bone-snapping freeze. Silas insisted she take the bed as always, but Della could hear his teeth chattering from the drafty corner where he sat wrapped in a thin horse blanket, trying valiantly to hide his shivering. Summoning every ounce of courage she possessed, Della whispered into the firelit darkness that he should please come and share the bed, that she couldn't bear for him to suffer on her account. Silas hesitated, then crossed the room with the slow, deliberate steps of a man approaching a sacred, trembling doe, and he asked her one more time if she was absolutely certain. With her heart hammering so loud she was sure he could hear it, she confessed in a tiny, terrified voice that she had never once shared a bed with another person in her entire sheltered life. Silas Creed paused in the golden glow of the lantern, looked deep into her eyes, and whispered a promise that seemed to seal itself into the very logs of the cabin walls around them. He whispered, "Then share mine forever," and the words were not a demand but a holy vow that wrapped around Della's fearful soul like the softest, warmest blanket imaginable. She slid over on the mattress, and he lay down on top of the quilt fully clothed, leaving a safe, respectful distance between them while the blizzard screamed and clawed at the roof. Somewhere in the deep, dark hours of that endless night, Della unconsciously rolled toward his warmth, and she woke to find her head resting on his solid chest and his arm lightly draped over her shoulder. To her complete astonishment, she did not feel trapped or afraid. She felt anchored, cherished, and fiercely protected in a way that made tears leak silently onto the fabric of his flannel shirt. From that night forward, Silas built a screen of woven willow branches to give her a private corner, but more often than not she left it open, craving the quiet comfort of his steady breathing nearby. He taught her to cook over an open flame, to identify the tracks of lynx and mule deer, and to laugh freely when the cabin cat, a fat orange tom named Rusty, stole bacon from the skillet. Della discovered that Silas had once been a promising carpenter in the East before betrayal cost him his business and drove him to the isolation of these high, lonesome peaks to nurse his wounded pride. She, in turn, told him about the orphanage's cold porridge, the cruel matron who forbade any physical affection, and the hollow loneliness that had shaped her into a silent, invisible wraith. As winter deepened its grip, they spent evenings by the hearth with Silas carving small wooden animals for her, while she read aloud from his small collection of worn, treasured books. The blizzard had trapped them physically, but something far more powerful had begun to grow between them, a tender, mutual belonging that neither dared to name aloud just yet in the quiet darkness. One evening, a stranger named Harlan Boggs appeared at the cabin door, claiming to have a prior legal contract for Della's hand that her deceased guardian had signed before sending her west. Harlan was a greasy, foul-smelling man with small, cruel eyes, and he declared that Della was his property and that Silas must hand her over immediately or face severe, violent consequences. Silas stepped onto the porch with a calm that chilled the air more than the winter wind, and he told Harlan that Della was a free woman who would never be anybody's property again. Harlan lunged with a hidden knife, but Silas caught his wrist with a grip like an iron trap and disarmed him, sending the would-be claimant tumbling into a deep snowdrift with a bellow of rage. Della watched from the window, a fierce new emotion burning in her chest, and when Silas returned inside, she threw her arms around his neck and held him with all her trembling strength. That night, with the threat of Harlan fading down the mountain, she asked Silas to lie beside her again, and this time she reached for his hand and placed it gently over her own beating heart. He held her through the long, quiet hours, and when dawn painted the snow in shades of pink and gold, he kissed her forehead with a reverence that made her feel absolutely priceless. As the first spring thaw melted the ice from the creek, Silas knelt in the mud beside the wild crocuses and asked Della to be his lawful wife, not by contract, but by her own free choice. She said yes before the word was fully out of his mouth, and she kissed him with a happy, salty mixture of tears and laughter that tasted like the most delicious spring rain. The circuit preacher arrived a month later, and they were married under a canopy of fresh green pine boughs with Rusty the cat serving as the unofficial and rather disinterested ring-bearer. Della wore a simple white cotton dress she had sewn herself, and Silas wore a new buckskin vest, and the entire mountain seemed to hold its breath in silent, reverent celebration of their union. On their wedding night, she led him to the bed that had once been her greatest fear, and whispered that she was no longer afraid because his promise had already come blissfully, beautifully true. They built a larger cabin together with an extra bedroom for the children they dreamed of, and the old pine bed became a cherished heirloom that held all their whispered secrets and giggles. Harlan Boggs was eventually arrested for horse thieving 2 counties over, and the threat of his return dissolved like morning mist, leaving them free to flourish in their hard-earned peace. Silas would often find Della standing by the window at dusk, and he would wrap his arms around her from behind and hum a tuneless song that always made her laugh and lean back into his embrace. She told him once that being forced to share a bed with a stranger had been her deepest terror, but sharing it with him had become the single greatest comfort of her entire transformed life. He replied that she had taken a broken, lonely shell of a man and taught him that true strength is measured not by calloused fists, but by a heart willing to wait and protect without conditions. Their ranch prospered, and their reputation for honest horse breeding and unyielding kindness became a beacon that drew good, weary souls to their valley from all across the rugged frontier. A young orphan girl showed up one autumn, shivering and half-starved, and Della simply took her hand and led her to the old pine bed, telling her that this room had once been her safe harbor too. Silas watched his wife tuck the child in and whisper a gentle promise of protection, and he realized the legacy of their love was already branching outward in ways that would outlast timber and stone. Years later, when their own daughter asked about the beautiful, worn wedding ring quilt, Della explained that it covered the very bed where her papa had whispered a vow that changed everything for a frightened, lonely mail-order bride. The mountain winter still howled outside that sturdy cabin, but inside there was always warmth, always trust, and always the echo of those tender words and it kindled an eternal fire between two shy, deserving souls. Silas would sometimes catch Della's eye across a crowded room of children and neighbors, and he would mouth the words, "Share mine forever," making her blush like a new bride every single time. She grew old beside him with laugh lines around her eyes and silver threads in her hair, and she never once regretted stepping off that stagecoach into the cold arms of the unknown high mountain country. Their story became a whispered legend among the settlers, proof that even the most fragile heart can find its fierce protection in the gentle, steadfast devotion of a true and honorable mountain man. The old pine bed still stands in the reconstructed cabin museum, and visitors swear they can feel a residual warmth and a soft, steady promise radiating from its hand-carved headboard, even now. I hope this tale of blizzards, whispered vows, and a bed that became a sanctuary has wrapped around your heart like the warmest quilt on a cold frontier night. If you believe that every lonely soul deserves someone who will whisper forever with absolute sincerity, then smash that like button and share this story with someone who needs a gentle reminder of love's patient power. Your subscription to Stories Hub Official means the world to us, and it allows us to continue crafting these immersive Western romances just for you, week after Precious Week. Please leave a comment and tell me which moment made your heart squeeze the tightest, because our storytelling community thrives on the beautiful connections forged in the glowing embers of a shared tale. From our cabin door to your screen, we send our deepest thanks, and we can't wait to welcome you back for another unforgettable journey into love, courage, and the timeless Western frontier.